Hello world! Welcome back to another episode of Three Candid Questions. I'm super excited to bring you a conversation with Oli Anderson, who speaks about realness, or how I like to call it, authenticity. We can also call it becoming whole, becoming who you truly are, whatever label you want to put on it, but that's sort of the core of this conversation. And we also discuss how creativity and compassion play into the whole thing of being real. This is an episode you might want to listen to rather than watch, because Oli's video kept freezing while we were talking. But of course you can also look at his crazy frozen images and how I look and still listen attentively. However you would like to enjoy this episode, have fun and let us know your thoughts. Speak soon.
Starting. Yeah. Now we are live.
Hello.
Hi, Oli. Nice to meet you again. Great,
yes,
great
thank
that we
you for
can have
having me on
another.
this day.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm delighted that we can have this conversation. So, as usual, I'm super curious where it will take us today. But before we jump in, I would love for you to just say a few words about who Oli is, what Oli does at the moment, so that the audience can just get to know you a bit more.
So, hello, audience. My name is Oli Anderson. I'm a life coach and business coach. My main area of interest is reality, which sounds like a very broad topic, but ultimately what I'm interested in is how we can tune in to what's real about us and how we can clear away some of the distortions or obstacles that we put in our own way when it comes to understanding the world and the way we can live our lives. Basically, it's about deprogramming ourselves, deconditioning ourselves, so that we can better align ourselves with our true intentions and our true values. That is why there's an overlap, I think, between the business stuff and the life stuff. If people can decondition themselves in their lives, then they're more likely, I think, and I've seen, to get better results from their business. That's again where the whole reality thing comes into it, because you can only really get results in reality, as philosophical as that might sound. So if you can go through this process of just getting out of your own way, figuring out what you're all about, what you really want, how you can connect to other people, how you can understand how life works, blah, 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 then in general, you'll get better results from life and your business. So that's my main thing that I do. The way that I kind of do that is through coaching. Mainly I like doing one-on-one coaching. I've done group coaching in the past, and I'm actually in the process of bringing back some group coaching stuff. I made a course recently called the Personality Transplant. It's got a really long name. It's called the 7-Day Personality Transplant System Shock for Realness and Life Purpose. I just wanted to give it a long name to try and, I don't know, be clever or something. But anyway, that course is like a free thing you can do. It's a 7-day course. I won't go into all the details, but basically it's about realness, which is the authenticity stuff, and then the life purpose thing. And then in my coaching, I do life coaching, like I keep saying, but I also do business coaching. Business coaching, my project is called Truth Bomb. You can go to the website if you want, truthbomb.co.uk. Basically, that's a combination of design thinking and philosophy applied to the business stuff. I won't rant about it too much, but ultimately it's a 4-step methodology: substance, style, communication, and community. If I'm saying too much, tell me to shut up. I know this is a very long introduction. And along with my coaching, the other stuff that I do is I write books. My main book is called Personal Revolutions, A Short Course in Realness. That is ultimately about looking at different ways of For example, you can look at it in terms of being active versus being passive. If you look at it in terms of being active, that's more real, because you're going to be more aligned with the way that things work, the way that you get results. So that book is just 166 of these different revolutions. That's what I call them, where it's just these different distinctions, so you can use them as a lens to look at life. That book ultimately is about the ego versus reality. So the short version of this big ass book. Am I allowed to use bad language on this podcast, by the way? Because sometimes
just be yourself. Just speak the way you would normally speak.
It's a pretty big ass book, but ultimately it's just about real versus unreal. Real being you're aligned with reality, unreal means you've created an idea of yourself that's holding you back from life, and you're living according to this false image, which just causes friction between you and reality. And that friction can turn to frustration, which can turn to anxiety and depression and blah, 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 blah. And then the other book I wrote, which is relevant to all this stuff,
Let me stop you there. Let me stop you, Oli,
Yep.
because you have just said something really interesting.
Okay.
So one thing that I hear you say is that you are a lot about reality and how we are aligned. And you just talked about this friction between when we create a false version of ourselves and, the reality of who we really are. So how did you come about all those topics? Like, why are you so passionate about? What happened in your life that you're all about this?
Okay, so it's quite a long and dramatic story. I'll give the abridged version. So, okay, where to begin? So basically what happened was I was like an edgy existential teenager in my misspent youth. I went traveling after I finished university. I went to Japan. When I was there, I had an amazing time. I ended up doing some modeling and like movie extra work. And originally I went to teach English, but I kind of slipped into doing that. Basically, I thought I was on top of the world, but I always had this kind of undercurrent of existential dread. I don't know why. I think I was just, some lingering childhood trauma or whatever it was. And a few years after being into my Tokyo experience, I got really sick. I got diagnosed with chronic kidney disease. So ultimately, I had to leave this life that I had in Japan and come back to the UK, which I was trying to avoid at the time. And basically, I ended up on dialysis. I needed a kidney transplant. I was super depressed, obviously, and it just made me realize that obviously you can't foresee everything that's going to happen in life. So all these ideals, all these visions, all these things that I thought I was going to be doing, well, actually, I ended up not doing them because I crashed back down to reality, and I had to rebuild my life. But in terms of this unreal versus real version of ourselves, what I realized was when I first came back to the UK with this kidney disease, and I tried to rebuild my life, I was approaching life as though I was still this version of myself that I was when I was in Japan, in Tokyo. So in my head, I was still kind of like a self-important, I suppose, in retrospect. But I thought, okay, I used to be a model and I'm traveling the world and I'm doing this. And I used to see myself as, the way I used to describe it in my head. Have you ever listened to Leonard Cohen? Do you know Leonard Cohen? He has a song, Susanna, I think, and he's talking about how he used to be like a gypsy poet boy. I used to think I was like that, some kind of artsy-fartsy kind of poetic guy traveling the world. And then boom, I crashed back down to reality. And I was trying to rebuild my life, but the way that I was trying to rebuild it was I had this image of myself that I was putting out into the world. And of course, because my reality had changed around me, because my situation had changed and I'd changed, the software basically that I was using was out of date. And so I had to go through this process of upgrading the software so that I could take what was still real about me, which was the experiential part of my experience of being myself and all these kind of things, but all these different labels and concepts and ideas that I'd attached to. Basically, I had to kind of take them out of the picture and then replace them with something new. And the only way I could do that was by looking at where I was. So obviously I'd hit rock bottom. At first, I was avoiding the fact that I'd hit rock bottom. I was kind of in denial. But it was only when I realized rock bottom is a kind of solid ground that you can build upon that I was able to finally accept what I was going through, let go of the old version of me, which in a way, as narcissistic as it sounds, it was kind of a grieving process. I was grieving the loss of the old version of myself. Once I could do that, well, it was like, the 7 stages of grief, or however many stages it is. The final stage was acceptance. And once I'd got this acceptance, that's when I could say, okay, well, I've lost all that stuff, but who am I now? Like, what do I want now? What vision can I create for myself that's still real, blah, blah, blah. And so that's when I started to realize there was a gap between how the way we can see ourselves, or the way we do see ourselves, and the way that we are will affect how frustrated we end up being in life. And so for me now, like everything ultimately comes down to that issue of identity, or the identity problems that we can create for ourselves by either facing our emotions or not. Because basically, the reason I wasn't accepting my situation and was trying to keep that old image of myself in place, that old self-image, was because I was trying to hide from all the emotional stuff I was going through during that period. It was a way of creating order in my life in a chaotic situation. And because the past was familiar, I was clinging onto it, but actually that was just holding me back. And so when I faced the chaos of myself and allowed all that emotional stuff to be brought up, all the shadow stuff, well, that's when I can actually get to a new place to put a new order in my life. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And I have the next question already. Like, how did you manage to drill down to the real you? Because I think, you know, what you say about the conditioning and everything that we believe is real about us and our reality, and that's all made up in our head anyway. You know, it's not easy to peel away all those layers and get really real with ourselves and then with others. Like, these are the emotions, this is who I really am, when everything is stripped off. So how did you get there?
So the way I look at it is, in life, there are basically two ways that you can get there. Maybe three, but there's definitely two. So the first way is the way that it happened to me. Like, sometimes in life, things just sneak up on you and it kind of shakes you awake. And normally it's because something bad happens. So, you know, maybe someone you really love dies, maybe you get an illness, maybe, I don't know, your business goes bust or whatever it is. These things will cause you to get out of your head and to see reality. I call this place the edge, because it's where all your ideas are confronted with the actual truth about life. Life is life in reality, in truth, is always moving. But these ideas that we have about it are often static. And it's that gap between the interpretations and the actual truth where we can start to grow. And so if something happens like this, in my case, the illness, it's basically something that, you know, I call it a personal revolution in the book that I'm talking about, because it basically causes you to go through your own kind of personal revolution at the level of yourself. So that's the first way, is that you just have life sweep the rug from underneath your feet. You fall down, you hit rock bottom, and on rock bottom, you will find solid ground. You'll find reality. That's just the way it goes, because it will take you out of these ideas that you've got about yourself, the world, and reality. It'll show you what's true and it'll show you what's not. But no matter how bad it gets, you'll still have yourself, as crazy as that might sound. You won't have those ideas about yourself, but you'll have what is real about you. There's something about you throughout the course of your life that will never change. You know, I do yoga. You do yoga as well. In yoga, they'll say that's the breath, right? That breath, that version of you in the space that's observing all these things that happen to you, that is what it puts you in touch with when you hit rock bottom. And when you hit that, that's what of all these different things that are happening. My video cut off then, sorry. So anyway, amidst all the chaos, you find yourself. I know that sounds a bit pretentious, but that's how it is. So that's one way, in answer to your question. The other way, maybe something bad doesn't happen to you, but you can put yourself on some kind of a path towards some kind of a spiritual experience or an awakening. It's the same kind of thing. It's the same path. The end result is the same. It's just a different way into getting there. So, you know, basically, if you follow most religions, they're all saying the same thing, I believe, which is that you get out of the world. You get out of your head, all the conceptual ideas, all the interpretations that we have about life.
Mm-hmm.
You step beyond that. You step beyond judgment. You step beyond duality, all these different interpretational devices that we have in our brain. And you start moving again. You start flowing with life because you see that real version of you that exists in the space between all those concepts and ideas and etc. that make up our self-image and make up the world. I don't know if that makes sense, but those two ways are how you can find reality. And in both of those cases, it just it basically just stops the impact of your ideas about yourself from stopping you from moving. For me, that's the main distinction between real and unreal. Real is just about flow. It's about movement. It's about moving towards wholeness. And I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself, but for me, reality is just about a connection to the whole. So you can be connected to the self, the whole of yourself to the greatest extent possible. So that means you're facing all your shadow stuff, you're facing your true intentions, you're facing your true values. You're not letting your ideas about who you think you should be hold you back from who you actually are. So ultimately, you're not disowning anything. That is wholeness. Wholeness, in the sense of the world, is about your connection to other people. If you have these false ideas, these false interpretations of life, it stops you from connecting to others because you'll be too busy judging yourself or judging them to actually have a meaningful connection. And then at the level of reality, these are the three levels: self, world, and reality. At the level of reality, it stops you from actually moving and flowing and growing in the way that you need to. And so for me, I say unreal or real. You can also say fragmentation is unreal or wholeness. Fragmentation is just any of this stuff that just makes you realize or makes you believe erroneously that you're disconnected from everything. I don't know if I've answered, but yeah.
Yeah, you have answered my question. And again, I was thinking, as you said, because someone might listen to this and ask themselves, like, but why should I go through all that drama, But you sort of answered it already, because you say to some extent the more whole we are and the more real we are, the better our growth, and also the more meaningful our connections with other human beings get.
Yeah, 100%. So if you think about it, the only thing you can grow is more real. If you're growing as a person, you're becoming more real and you're becoming more whole. That's ultimately what it's all about. The things that stop you from growing are the things that cause you to be less whole in yourself and to be disconnected from yourself and the people in the world around you. And so the way that I like to think about it is we all have a natural drive towards wholeness. Moving towards wholeness is the natural state of human beings.
Yeah.
That's how our lives are designed to unfold. I don't want to rant too much, but ultimately, this natural process towards wholeness is always kind of just going on beneath the surface of our conscious minds, the little box that we live in. And it's our attachment to that box that stops that natural drive towards wholeness unfolding in the way that it needs to. Actually, you could say that we're whole already. We're already connected to ourselves. We're already connected to the world. We're already connected to, all the natural systems and the universe and all these different things. But we create interpretations of life that stop us from understanding that and that block us from moving in that direction. And so a lot of us, if we have unresolved emotional stuff, we feel like we need healing. Well, the reason we feel like that is because we're blocking that return to wholeness. Healing, if you want to use that word, like, to be honest, I try to avoid that word in my own way. Healing, it just means that you're becoming whole again. You're either whole or you're not. I know it sounds too simple maybe, but it is that simple. You're either allowing yourself to move towards wholeness or you're not. And the reason it's difficult for people is because a lot of the time, if we've been conditioned in our earlier years to put ourselves in this box, aka the ego, then the consequence of that is living in the box keeps a lot of our emotional stuff hidden beneath the surface. So for me, it's usually it boils down to shame, guilt, and trauma. We have all these different things in our lives that we deem to be unacceptable. And that's just the shadow stuff. The shadow stuff, it can be positive qualities or negative qualities. Either way, as we go through life, we get taught and then we hypnotize ourselves to believe that certain things about us are unacceptable. And so we create a version of ourselves, the ego, that is a representation we like to give ourselves of life and ourselves without those qualities existing. But because we're always whole and because those things never go anywhere, well, they're just constantly trying to get our attention from beneath the surface. And that's why we kind of have a battle going on within ourselves. Basically, the battle is between the fragmented version of ourselves, which we think is going to help us to survive, which actually it does help us to survive in the short term. But as I said, you know, when I was giving an example of my story, it helps us to survive, but only because it's showing us an outdated version of ourselves. And so actually, by clinging to it, we're just causing more problems. It helps us, but only with a limited lifespan, if that makes sense. And so by not accepting that, we're keeping all this stuff at bay and we're basically blocking moving towards wholeness. I know I've been a bit repetitive, sorry.
Yeah, no, but the whole idea about wholeness fits perfectly into the, you know, I mean, some people talk about in spirituality about us being born again and then, you know, going through all the lessons of life. So I feel it's very connected. However you want to describe it, there's definitely something humans strive to achieve, like a sort of completed version or something of ourselves. So the whole version, you say. I'm just curious about one thing in terms of like, you know, accepting our true emotions and everything that represents our wholeness. What role does creativity play for you there? Because I hear you talking about, you know, design in your Truth Bomb project and being a life coach, which is also quite a creative thing to do, and writing books, and then being a model. So all creative tasks. So where does creativity come in for you when it comes to realness?
Okay, so ultimately for me, I had to take a breath so I don't like just pour my guts out. The short version, the simple version is creativity it's a two-way process. And it's a two-way process because it's about your relationship with reality. Surprise, surprise, I'm using that word again. So reality is just, I should probably say, I don't think reality is a relative thing. I think the truth is the truth, but the thing that we all see differently is our interpretations of that truth. And the truth, in the language I've been using, is just wholeness. And I should probably say as well, wholeness in our lives as human beings doesn't mean that we ever reach a complete state of being. I think we're always moving towards more wholeness, but you know, it's that thing that we're always a work in progress. And the reason that we're a work in progress is because in this human form that we have, we will never, ever be fully connected to the whole for two reasons. One, we have limited perception because we're in these physical bodies. So, you know, I can't see what's behind me now unless I look on the camera. I can't lick my elbow, whatever it is. Our bodies are limited, and the way that they perceive and experience the world is fragmented, but also it means that we can never fully be whole because we're just not fully connected to everything. But also, on top of that, to complicate matters, we perceive things in a fragmented way, but then we interpret what we see in a fragmented way based on our own emotional stuff and the interpretations that we need in order to keep believing whatever we need to believe to stay the same, basically. Because most of us don't want to grow every day and move towards wholeness every day. We want to have a relative degree, which is normal and healthy, of stability when it comes to the way we see ourselves. So for that reason, we can't be completely whole. We can have moments where we taste wholeness. Abraham Maslow, he called them peak experiences. That's, for me, it's just when the subject, which is obviously us having these experiences of life, and the object of our experience basically become connected to each other. So an example I always give when I'm talking about these peak experiences is when I was in Japan, I climbed Mount Fuji. You go up in the night, and then in the next morning you can come down the mountain. I came down that mountain, and I literally ran down Mount Fuji, and because there's all this volcanic ash, you can take these massive leaps, and I just felt really alive. So for me, that's an example of a peak experience where I got out of my head. I wasn't thinking about Oli Anderson. I was totally connected to my surroundings. I was fully alive, blah, blah, blah. That showed me what wholeness is. You have loads of moments like that in your life. You have, I don't know, you might be making love to someone. You might be riding a motorbike, not at the same time necessarily. You might go scuba diving and you feel connected to the whole ocean. All these different experiences you have, they show you that you and life are the same thing. But then the problem is, you go back to your normal life and you're sending emails and working on spreadsheets and whatever it is that people do. The world creeps in again, and you start to become more fragmented. But as long as you know that when you have those peak experiences, that is the real version of you, then you can return to that place, or you can start moving in that direction again. And so that's basically the point I'm making here in this long and winding road that I've taken us down. The point is that if you understand your true identity is beyond any ideas or any concepts, and that it's in those moments, and that is wholeness, then all the other times where you get caught up in these limited perceptions and limited interpretations, you can catch yourself and you can say, oh, okay, I'm caught up in the world again now. I'm caught up in my ideas of Oli Anderson or in Sabrina or whatever it is, and maybe that's holding me back. I can't remember what the original question was, though, that I'm supposed to be answering right now, so I apologize.
We're talking about creativity and how that plays a role in.
Yeah. So, okay. So this is relevant, I promise. So if it's all about wholeness or fragmentation,
prove that it's relevant.
But if creativity is about that as well, then there's a link, I think, between the way we live a real life and the way that creativity works. And so the reason I went down that digression about these peak experiences and all that kind of stuff, creativity is the way of seeing what's going on inside you and moving towards more wholeness in yourself. That's the short version. But the reason I said it's a two-way street, it's a two-way street because if you only go into the creative process with your ideas about yourself or your ideas about your creative work, and you're trying to prove something instead of learning, then your attitude is not real and it is not going to get you the best results from your creative work. And the reason is all creativity is about learning from reality. So I call this process creative synthesis. All it means is, say you want to write a book or you want to write a song or whatever creative thing it is that you want to do. When you first set out on that path, you will probably have an idea about what the end result is going to look like. That idea really is just informed by all kinds of different things you've got going on in your relationship with yourself. And so potentially, for example, maybe my intention in writing in a novel or a book or something is to let the world know how brilliant I am. Maybe the intention is to tell the world whatever agenda I have figured out about life and etc. Okay, to some extent, you have to do that because you need a starting point. But if you're too attached to the outcome that you want from the creative work, then as you start writing or you start painting or you start composing the song, whatever it is, then that attachment to the idea, to the interpretation, to the result that you're trying to get is going to block you having an experience where you let in new information, you let in new insight, you let reality, i.e. whatever unfolds within the creative process, you let reality show you something new and bring something new to the equation that you can use, and that is going to allow you to become transformed, i.e. to become more real, more whole as you go through that process of doing the work. And the reason that creativity can make you more whole is because, one, you have to ride through uncertainty. So as you get into the creative process and it starts to deviate from your expectations or your ideals about what you want the work to look like or to embody, if you're not been real about it, then it's going to trigger all your underlying stuff that you've been trying to hide from yourself. So the shame, the trauma, whatever it is, that if you have a lot of that stuff, you can't handle uncertainty. And if you're not prepared to face it, well, you'll try and view everything through the lens of this ego, this box that we were talking about, in order to keep it at bay. But the only way you can ride through the uncertainty and therefore finish the creative work is to face that stuff and to use the work as a vessel for riding out to the other side, whatever lessons you need to learn from that stuff at the time. And because the final result, yeah, you get what I'm saying? So the final result of all this work, of all these things that we do, is always wholeness. It has to be. So all that's going on, it's like life. Basically, life and creativity are the same thing. So if you if you can live in this creative way that I'm talking about, or if you can work in this creative way, then you can apply that to your life as well, and you'll be more human. And the reason is because this attitude is just about working with principles that allow you to work in alignment with reality, not against it. So, for example, the simplest example I can give now, uncertainty. If you're being unreal, you will try to just impose certainty on everything that you do. If that's a creative project, it'll affect the results you get. If it's your life, you'll lapse into control freakery, and it'll affect the results that you get from life. It's the same thing. And it's because you're not moving with reality towards wholeness. You've taken the little fragments that you've already got and you've become attached to, and you're giving that precedence. And so creativity, in that sense, is a process of just bringing what needs to be brought to the surface and learning what needs to be learned. Life and creativity are both transformational, and if you can understand the way that transformation works for the average human being, because there's certain principles that apply to all of us having this human experience, then you'll get better results from life and business and creativity. Ultimately, the way that I look at it is it's about spirals. It's about removing these layers of fragmentation. So in life and creativity, again, it's the same thing. So in life, for example, you're plodding along, you think you're a certain version of yourself, boom, something happens. Maybe your girlfriend or your boyfriend break up with you. That's a transformation. Maybe you get an illness. That's a transformation. Maybe, blah, 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 whatever it is, all these different things happen in life. And they transform, if you learn what you need to learn and go through the process, they transform the way that you see yourself. So in the example of a girlfriend or boyfriend breaking up with you, before that event takes place, you think you're a certain version of yourself. You have certain expectations of where you're going to be in 5-10 years, etc. All those expectations and ideas, they become part of your identity. And so when that person leaves you or you leave them, well, you have to go through the process of letting go of the fragmentation, the ideas and the illusions, and just see what real stuff is left afterwards. It's the same with creative work. The creative work is actually a way of just giving yourself some kind of a transformational experience if you're prepared to learn it. So say you're going to write a book. Okay, it's a spiral in the example, like the example similar to the example I just gave. You go into it, you think you're a certain version of yourself, you think you're writing a book about self-help or whatever. Before you know it, or you're actually writing a book about spirituality or trauma or whatever you've got going on inside yourself. And only by going through that process do you see what's real about you and what's not, or you go more deeply into understanding the real version of yourself, because you increase your awareness. And when you get the awareness, you can accept yourself more, you can accept life more, and then you can do something that is going to be, more aligned with the truth, I suppose, than just your ideas about life, rather than anything else.
And what would you say to people who listen to all this talk of ours about realness and creativity and say, like, I'm absolutely not a creative person?
Yeah, I would say that that's not true. I think, and I've seen that everybody is creative. And I can say it with confidence because if you think about what creativity is not this mythical thing that, we put on a pedestal sometimes, where we think, we can just, I don't know, we can click our fingers, and if we're a creative person, we can manifest a unicorn, or we can, I don't know, make a hamster start tap dancing, or just whatever it is.
That would be cool.
Creativity, it would be cool, yeah. I wonder if I can learn to do that. There might be a course.
Yeah, a unicorn especially.
But with the creativity, it's not about this limitless way of being. It's about working with limitations. And if limitations are part of life, and you need limitations to be creative, then all human beings are creative. If you think you're not creative, then probably you're avoiding something. Because like I said, the creativity brings the shadow stuff. It means you have to face whatever limitations you've currently been faced with, either in life or in a creative project. And once you have those limitations, or you have some kind of parameters that you need to work within, well, the pressure that puts on your brain to figure out a solution, basically, is gonna make you tap into your creative resources. That's the most simple definition of creativity, I think. It just means you have a problem, and it can be any kind of problem, and your brain is going to start trying to figure out solutions to solve the problem. And again, the reason that it comes back to reality and being real is because you can only solve a problem in reality. If you can't find a solution, well, it means you're not dealing with an actual problem. It means you're either avoiding the solution, or you're refusing to accept something about life. But either way, the only thing that is going to offer you a solution is reality. And so the thing that's stopping you from moving towards finding that solution, i.e., using your creative resources, is your ability to either get out of this box or to expand the boundaries of this box and let in some new insight and some new truth. And so all I'm saying really is that everybody is creative. If you think you're not creative, then you're probably hiding something from yourself, or you're hiding something from reality, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And it also, again, shows us that, the idea that we often carry around with us about creativity, it doesn't mean you have to be drawing or writing or doing all that. It's really all about practicality sometimes, just working out a solution. And that's pretty simple.
That's how
everyone does it. Yeah.
It's very human. Like, I think human beings evolved to be creative because of the limitations of being a fragmented body on a fragmented planet. Like, creativity ultimately, it's the difference between eating and not eating at the end of the day, at the most practical level. You say you're a caveman, you're starving. Well, you need to go out and find some food. How are you going to find a creative solution? Creativity doesn't have to be like I think it's overly romanticized sometimes. It's an amazing thing, but there are so many amazing things about life. We put them on a pedestal, but actually they're just basic. So love is another one. I know I sound like a hippie saying that, but like everyone's, love is just a basic thing. Do you know what I mean? Compassion is a basic thing. Creativity is a basic thing. And like when we've been unreal and we've been conditioned by the world and by other people that are unreal and bring us up, we think that life is something other than what it is, and we think we're something other than what we are, and then everyone gets confused, and then they become detached from their basic humanity and the human faculties and power that they have.
So I'm just thinking, once I start connecting, like, as someone who's listening to this and says, okay, now I will start connecting with my creative self. I will start facing my emotions. And we said in the beginning of the conversation that the thing that really also get out of it is like these real connections with people then. So now that you say love and compassion is also just something that's very basic that plays into the realness or the wholeness, however we want to call it. So if someone again wants to work that out, is there some experience you can share where you say like, that's when I realized it's just like a basic thing. It's just, a part of being whole, how I love or how I'm compassionate. Like what came up for you there? I'm very curious now.
What do you mean exactly? Sorry. So like, how do I?
Yeah, like how do you have a very clear vision of or opinion on what you think about creativity? So when you say love and compassion are just as basic in life, what are they for you?
So how do I define those things?
Yeah, and how did you come to say like, okay, that's a part of being whole, but how? Like if we have this romanticized version of compassion or love or creativity, like what in your opinion is the real deal?
Yeah. So so at a simple level, if you think about it, compassion, for example, is just about, it's the namaste thing, right? So what's whole in me is whole in you. And so if you can understand that everything is, we're all connected, we're all experiencing the same thing, the same truth. We all go through the same rites of passage. We all have the same struggles in life. We all have the same, the human experience is the human experience for all of us. It's the hero's journey thing. The scenery might be slightly different. So, I'm in the UK, you're where you are, all these different things, the superficial surface level of life might be different, but the core stuff, the real stuff beneath the surface of all the superficial labels and all those kind of things, it's the same for all of us. And so once you understand what's real about you, well, you have to understand what's real about other people as well. And so for me, as an example, once I realized that, okay, I can get out of my head and I can keep growing and I can keep moving forward and I have visions and, I'm not perfect and I don't need to be perfect and I've got insecurities and blah, blah, but I'm still real. When you understand your realness, that you're just a flawed human being doing your best and making the most of life and your challenges and all this kind of stuff, it makes it easier to understand other people. And so because I sound a bit arrogant there. I was going to say, because I'm so real, blah, blah, blah. Because I've been through this process and I've managed to look at the box I was keeping myself in, and I've taken myself out of that box, i.e., I've gone from being a fragmented version of myself to a version of myself that's more whole, not complete, not perfect. It's more whole than I used to be. Well, now I can approach other people from that place of being whole. And what will happen is either they will reciprocate from a place of wholeness themselves, or if they're still in the box because they have whatever emotional stuff they've got going on, maybe they won't reciprocate and they're not ready to be spontaneous and free, and they need to control every aspect of all those different things. Either way, I will be able to be compassionate because I'll either be able to have a real connection and say, oh, okay, I'm trying to be real with myself. You're being real with yourself. Boom, let's have some new sparks of insight and blah, blah, blah. Or maybe I'll be thinking I'm being real and then I meet somebody who is a bit of a control freak or they're locked inside themselves or whatever it is. It won't bother me personally because I will be able to understand, okay, this person probably, they've got some emotional stuff going on. They don't need to, they're in the box that they put themselves in for a reason. That's the place they need to be. And so it doesn't have to bother me. And I don't mean it doesn't bother me as in I don't care. I just mean I don't have to take it personally. And so by being whole myself or trying to be whole in myself, it makes it a lot easier to understand where other people are coming from and whether they're being real towards me or unreal. Well, it doesn't matter because they're just a human being. They're having their experience that we're all having. They're where they are. They're growing. They're moving towards wholeness at their own pace. And it just allows me to understand that the context of everybody's life is as exactly as it needs to be based on what they've been through. And it makes it easier for me to just live without expectations of people, without unreal expectations of myself, and to just know that as long as you come from a real place, you can let people be what they need to be. You can be what you need to be. You don't have to come from an ego place where you're trying to control everybody and get them to fit into the way that your ego needs them to be so that you can stay the same and not grow. And it just moving towards wholeness in my life, or trying to. I don't want to sound like I'm fully evolved or anything like that. I just mean putting myself on this
you're
path.
in the process like everyone else. Yeah. Of course.
So like by involving myself in this process and looking at my own stuff, as in my shadow stuff, and etc., it just makes it easier to deal with life. And it brings us full circle, kind of, because all it's doing is it's those three levels I talked about really early on: self, the world, and reality. So by going through this process and starting to look at my own stuff, that has allowed me to accept myself. So I now believe that ultimately I accept myself basically unconditionally. Like, it's very rare now that I will judge myself or criticize myself. Even if I make a mistake, I won't beat myself up. I'll pick myself up. I'll say, okay, shit, I screwed up. What have I learned from it? What am I going to do next? Maybe 10 years ago, I made a mistake. It would have been playing around on the hamster wheel in my mind for weeks or months because I was trying to define myself in a certain way because of the fragmentation and the box that I was putting myself in. And the mistake would go against the definition of myself that I wanted to live according to. Now that I've got rid of all that, I make mistakes every day and I don't care. And it's fine. It's good because I feel like I'm learning, I'm growing, etc. And so the point I'm trying to make is that by going through this process or putting myself on the path towards going through this process, I don't judge myself and I accept myself unconditionally. At the second level, in these three levels about self, world, and reality, the second level of other people and the world, I don't judge the world. Maybe I observe things, like I observe that, people are quirky sometimes, or if somebody is consistently, I don't know, dysfunctional towards me or whatever, then I'll just leave the relationship. But even if I just leave a relationship, I've got a little mantra that I always use: give me something real or GTFO. And all that means is if somebody is constantly giving me an unreal interaction or exchange or vice versa, then basically I just go and that's it. See you later. There's no point keeping a dysfunctional relationship going, but I'm not judging that person. I'm not, I have no ill will to them or anything like that. I just understand that we're growing in different ways. And right now you're there, I'm here, and now I'm going to go over there. And basically I can only do that because I accept myself. If I didn't accept myself, then I think if somebody didn't like me or something, then maybe I would become a people pleaser. I try too hard and beg and beseech that they like me. But actually, because I've worked on my shame, well, now I have some self-respect, I would never, do that. If they don't like me, that's cool. No problem. I understand why you might not. But I also, I'm not going to get angry with them. How dare you not like me? Who do you think you are? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. It's because when you accept yourself, the opposite of acceptance is judgment. And so when you accept yourself, judgment. So you don't need to judge yourself. You don't need to judge other people. You can step away from the judgments that may come at you from the world, and they don't have to bother you anymore. And you can be compassionate to the people that are judging you, because you understand that if they're judging you, well, that's only because they've judged themselves first and they don't accept themselves. And so, well, who cares? It says more about them than you. You can be compassionate, okay, but move on.
Yeah.
You don't need to worry about it. And and then at the third level of reality, it's just the same thing. You realize that in reality, there is no judgment. You can step beyond it. Reality is about wholeness, as we keep saying. Judgment is about trying to put some fragmented label on somebody or something, usually at the level of good or bad. But it always comes down to the interpretations that people carry of life. It's never, the truth itself, because like we said, the truth is beyond interpretation, or that's what I think anyway. And people attach to certain interpretations because of the identity that they need to maintain because of their unresolved emotional stuff. And so most interpretations and the judgments that stem from them, it just goes back to the person themselves and how they see themselves, what they're willing to face, whether they're wanting to face their shadow stuff or whatever it is. And so ultimately, that's all we're talking about. The life without judgment. And I know it could sound a bit super free, because judgment is the only thing that can stop you being free. But I'm not being nihilistic. Like, I think in a way, something I've thought a few times, I've shared it on my social media and stuff, but ultimately, you can say life is meaningless or life means everything. But the way that you get there is the same thing. And the way that I like to think of it is, on one hand, you've got spirituality, or whatever you want to call it, these peak experiences, this experience of whole life. On one hand, you've got that spirituality, I'll call it here for the sake of brevity, although I haven't been very brief. I get the irony of saying that. But anyway, and then on the other hand, you've got nihilism. So nihilism is just the idea everything sucks, nothing means anything, life is awful, we die, and then that's that. It's awful. But these things are both the same. The only difference between spirituality and nihilism is that with spirituality, everything is full, and with nihilism, everything is empty. That's the only difference. In the world has either been full or been empty. And if you take this approach, well, the only thing that's going to fill you is that feeling of wholeness and connection. And that's basically what this is all about. And I know it's been a big, long rant, and we've been talking forever, so apologies. But that's where this all ties in, because creativity and realness allow you to stop judging yourself. You can use it as you can use creative work as a testing ground to see where you've got blocks and where you are judging yourself and what you're scared of sharing with the world and etc. And the only place you can get to, no matter who you are, is that you can get to a place where you're more whole than you were yesterday or the day before or 10 years ago or whatever it is. Have you heard that analogy of the blind men and the elephants?
No, that doesn't ring a bell. Tell me.
So it kind of sums it all up. So basically, it's an analogy. I think it's from the Upanishads or something like that. But anyway, it's a super simple story. There's just a bunch of blind men standing around an elephant. Obviously, they're blind, so they can't see. They're all holding a different part of the elephant. So, like, one guy, he's got hold of the... you've heard it, right? So one of them has hold of he holds the leg. He says, this is a tree trunk. The other one's holding the actual trunk of the elephant. This is a snake. etc. They're all holding different parts of the elephant, and they all just start arguing about their interpretations. That's all they argue about the interpretations, they start fighting, beating each other up, and it causes all this conflict and confusion. The point of that story is that they're all wrong because they're just arguing about their interpretations. They've got different fragments that they've become attached to, but the truth is the same for all of them. And that's what we're doing in life. Like when we get caught up in this box, in this ego place, we fragment things, we create interpretations of ourselves, the world, and reality because of how we want to see ourselves, or how we need to see ourselves. And then we just go out there like the blind men, basically just denying life, arguing about our interpretations, not the truth, because you can't argue about the truth. The truth is the truth. We only argue about interpretations, and that's what causes the conflict. There's no conflict in the truth. It's in our interpretations of it. And that's how we're living. It stops us getting the best results from life and business and creativity because it causes us to judge. It causes us to judge other people. It stops us being compassionate towards others because we need people to be something other than what they are. We're not accepting them at a real level because we don't accept ourselves at a real level. And then we die. That's the end of that.
And with that, we'll end this conversation and say, like, people, you don't want to live this life. You don't want to die like this. So,
That's
go through
exactly
this process. Embrace the process of moving towards realness or wholeness, however we want to call it, so that you can get the best results out of life.
Basically, yes. Well summarized. So that was an amazing conversation, mainly because it was just me talking. So thank you.
I'm a good listener.
Yeah, you're a very good listener. So thank you for listening to all that. I can't believe nearly an hour's done already.
That's how it happens usually on this podcast.
So
but thank you so much for your time and for sharing all your thoughts and, for putting it all into this perspective of wholeness and realness. I think it has been very enlightening. So thanks.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for listening to me. And
Oh, good.
yeah.